It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Changemakers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. We all know the feeling that we get when someone else receives the very thing that we desire. Envy is something that just about everyone struggles with at one time or another. It steals our joy and it chips away at our self-confidence and peace, often leaving us feeling guilty. Today's guest, Dillehay, recounts how she spent many years being resentful of others. She encourages us to stop feeling guilty and to learn how to control unhealthy emotions by understanding what's behind them. Tilly is the author of the book, Seeing Green, Don't Let Envy Color Your Joy. Welcome, Tilly. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Tilly, we all experience feelings of envy from one time to another. I remember after my mother passed away and when I would go through Facebook and see pictures of other people's family holidays or Mother's Day barbecues, I just remember how horrible that was. And I was so envious.
Yeah.
I wanted to be those people. So what is your experience with this emotion?
Yes, well, envy has interfered seriously with a couple very close relationships in my life. The first story that I tell in the book is about my sisters. I'm one of 7 kids, but there are 2 girls just below me in the lineup that got into music when I was in college, and I'd had aspirations for being a jazz singer myself, but I'd never really pursued it. And one day they decided to pull out these songs that they had been working on and writing in secret and let us hear them, in like a coffee shop gig. And it was so painful to hear them having just made this beautiful art in without my knowledge, I have it kind of flowered up behind me. And they could continue to pursue that music for years. They got into the indie music scene, started a band with a couple of guys. And every time I had to go to a concert, I sat there in the dark, and it was so painful I could hardly do it. Anytime I got one of their new records, I stuck it away in a drawer because I didn't want to look at it. And there was a point around the time that we were all getting married that I realized my very close relationship with these girls had been destroyed by my envy because I had become strangers to them just because I couldn't handle what they were doing and how beautiful it was.
And these were women that you loved.
Yeah.
These were people that you really cared about.
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I think the worst thing about envy is that it often flowers between peers. So it's it's your coworker, it's your friend, or it's your sister, and those are the people that you sometimes measure yourself against. So that is often where envy crops up, and it can really ruin a good close relationship.
Tilly, what made you finally see what was happening between you and your sisters?
It was I think it was because of the wedding season. We all got married within the same year, me and these 2 girls. And something about weddings seems to kind of define relationships. But, so it was that season that I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, something is deeply wrong, and I've got to understand what it is. And the diagnosis of envy was not long behind that. And I was reading a lot of things at that time. I was reading scripture. I was reading C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis, but there was an essay by C.S. Lewis called The Weight of Glory that I read around that time. And that essay is not about envy, but it's about the personal glories that mankind was made to wear, and about the glory that will be given at the end of time when we stand before the God who made us. And there was something about just that discussion of envy in terms of something that human beings can actually possess that clicked for me, that the things I envy are the glories that I see in other people. So then I started to identify other glories in other people that I also had a hard time with, glories like intelligence, charm, physical beauty. And that was the structure of the book kind of came out of that. There are chapters on each of these glories in the book, and just a discussion of what they look like. And usually it's when we have a little bit of that glory ourselves that we have a hard time interacting with other people who have more of it, because that's what envy does not like, is inequality.
So it really has less to do with the accomplishments of another person and more to do with how you're feeling about yourself.
That is true. Yes, and it's not, the heart of envy is not a heart that can rejoice when it sees a good thing being done by somebody else, because the heart of envy is all about the self and making sure that nobody outdoes you. It's an ugly feeling. It's not something we like to own up to, I don't think.
Tilly, what do you believe happens to us when we're envious of other people?
It turns you in on yourself in a very unhealthy and painful way, because you have to hide that feeling. It's not something that you want to go up to your friend and say, just so you know, I've been resenting you because you were doing better than me.
Right.
It's the envious heart, at least, is not capable of doing that, because you want to hide that at all costs. So you become isolated in it, and if you continue to dwell on that in your heart, you're going to become sicker and sicker with it.
So you write that there are 7 kinds of envy. Can we just go through these 7 very briefly and maybe just talk about a trait that this type of envy encompasses? So the first one is the envy of the body. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the envy of the body is very straightforward. It's the envy that we experience when we meet someone who is more beautiful, more healthy, maybe more athletically talented. It's just the physical characteristics of somebody. And I don't know, I think this can follow you throughout your life depending on what your personal priorities are. I do think it's probably a bigger problem for younger people. But,
well, society, the societal messages try to show us what is beauty. Yeah. And when we don't conform to that, it naturally we would be envious of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a high importance is placed on it. If we swallow that lie about what's defining for us, then beauty is going to become a really big deal.
Tilly, the next one then is envy of charm and influence. What does this mean?
Yeah, this is just the envy of somebody who draws other people in with the magnetism of their personality. Maybe they're very funny, or maybe they're very honest. Maybe they're one of these people who just makes you feel seen with their personality. It can be hard to be, especially if this is something you value or that you wish you had or have a little bit of. Sometimes it feels like these people, every party is their party, people just are so drawn to them. Yeah, so this is also straightforward. It's a bigger deal in school for many of us, when grades are given and all that, but sometimes it follows into adulthood when, we have a job where the intellect matters, or where our peer group is a group where intellect really matters. It can be something you really struggle with. Somebody gets A's without effort, basically, in life, and you're struggling for a B.
So then let's talk about the next 4. Options, creativity, competence and control, and relationship. Yeah, so options is the envy of money, and that's pretty straightforward. And the envy of creativity is powerful. I talk about the fact that creatives are storytellers, and that everybody is telling their stories to the best of their ability. And if you meet somebody else who's telling the truth with their stories, you should rejoice to see that they're doing a great job at it, because they're essentially fighting on the team of truth and beauty. And then the envy of competence and control, that is the envy of somebody who's kind of got it all together, is able to keep their ducks in a row and accomplish a whole lot, and you may be more of a limper, than an Olympian. And that can be hard, just depending on how much you value that. And then the envy of relationship, I think, can be the most painful of all. This is what you were struggling with when you lost your parent. The beautiful thing that you see when people are in healthy close relationship with each other, sometimes it is difficult to behold if you're not a part of it, especially if, say it's a great marriage and your marriage is not everything you'd hoped, or
they're really close with their children, and your children are estranged from you. This is a real glory. It's a beautiful thing, but it can be hard to be on the outside of it.
What I've learned, Tilly, from everything that I've gone through and, looking at this list, these are things that we believe we want when we see other people having them. And I've learned that we're usually envious when we live our life in a place of lack, when we believe that there isn't enough for all of us. But when we shift and come from a place of abundance where there's more than enough love or money or creativity or any of the things we want, that there's more than enough for all of us, that's when we can release some of these feelings. Do you agree with that? Have you experienced that in your life?
Absolutely. And I, being a Christian who believes that this is a God of abundance, that I'm worshiping, and for me to behave as if he is withholding something from me just because he's not giving me this particular trait or this particular house or this particular family situation is me doing exactly what you're saying, coming from a place of lack and acting as if there's not enough to go around when he's made it perfectly clear that there is plenty to go around.
So working with that premise that there's abundance and that there's more than enough for all of us, what strategies then can you offer to help people turn the way they're feeling into joy?
Yeah, well, I have a chapter that talks just about specific strategies, and I actually talk about virtues to put on as you're putting off the sin of envy. The first of those is love, putting on love for those that you're envying. And some of the ways of doing that is just going through these motions of looking at the glory that they're wearing, gazing at it when you've been avoiding that for a long time, praising them to their face and to other people. It's a great exercise just for kind of getting yourself onto their team, loving them by praying for them in ways that show you're really rooting for them. You're praying for their further success when they're already maybe successful. And then another virtue that I talk about is putting on diligence, going ahead and just realizing that you've been given your own job to do. And when you work it with all your might and do your absolute best, it really knocks one of the legs out of envy, out from under it, because one of the stings in envy is sometimes the knowledge that you could have done the job you were given, but you neglected it and someone else, went ahead and did that thing. So putting on diligence, and then putting on humility, and then finally putting on the virtue of transparency, where you become willing to talk openly with, depending on the situation, talk openly with the person that you're envying, which in the case of my sisters and a couple other close relationships was really the only way that I could restore that relationship with them. I had to be honest with them about the way that I'd been feeling.
What was the result of that conversation? Were they aware of your feelings?
They never told me whether they had ever used the word envy in their minds to describe it. They knew that something was wrong. And I think generally when you've had a close relationship that's been interfered with by envy, they know something's off or something is weird between you, but they may not know what it is. And of course, it's very difficult to have this conversation because you have to admit to them that you thought they were better than you and that you were resenting them for it, and that's very hard. But they, in every case that I've ever had this conversation with somebody, they have just met me with the ultimate just graciousness and readiness to restore and to forgive. And I know that, a few times somebody has confessed envy to me, and I think generally there is a quick impulse to meet them halfway and to say, I've been there, and let's work together to be intimate again.
When you examined your feelings toward other people, were you always feeling the same type of envy? Was there one area of your life that you wanted to work on, or was it across the board?
Mm-hmm. It was a few specific ones. I think the main ones I've dealt with were the creativity with my sisters and beauty as well with them. And I had another friend where competence and sort of control of life was a big one, and that came between us. And then more recently, I've had a charm, a friend there where the charm was the big thing, and I had to. I wanted I wanted to be the person that everybody loved best, and that was not happening. So yeah, so I guess I've had sort of taken my turns with different ones, but I also have to say that it seems like it depends on where I am in life and what I'm valuing more than I should. And I may not value beauty the way that I used to when I was a little younger, but now, I'm in a season where maybe friendships are a big thing for me, and so that comes to the forefront. So does that make sense?
Oh, it does.
It kind of changes.
It was actually, I was thinking of a quote I had seen recently where it said, "I'm not busy worrying about the color of your grass because I'm too busy watering my own." And I think that it just goes back to,
That's
working on yourself. It really has less to do
Yeah.
with your sister's accomplishments. It's the fact that you're not achieving what you wanted. It's not your sister's issue. It was the way you were viewing yourself at any point in your life. And that's what we all do. The beauty, I look at these models and sometimes I allow that to get to me. Or in my work, I might see someone else who I believe is getting so much further ahead than I am. It's taking me longer. It's natural. Being envious is a natural emotion. So how do you recommend we really self-analyze to see what type of envy we're allowing to impact our life?
It's pretty easy, actually. You just look at your life and say, what is it that I'm the proudest of, or what is it that I want somebody to know about me first? When I meet someone at a party or when I write up my bio or whatever, what is it that I lead with? And that tends to be sort of the thing that you are, that's at the forefront of your way of defining yourself. And then look around and see, what do you do when you meet someone who's doing it better? What do you do when you meet someone who's superior in that area, and how do you handle that? Because it's going to happen. There's always going to be somebody who is a little bit better in that area that you value. You've got to learn to handle that graciously.
It really all comes back to self, because I've met people who have been envious of things that I've done, and rather than self-reflect and to work on themselves, they just try to steal from someone else. And I think if you allow envy to govern your life or cloud your judgment, you end up making decisions that you may not have otherwise made.
That's right. You do. You definitely do. Some of the most insane decisions people have made in history were made over envy. You're going to be responsible for your own life and for your own heart, and no other glory that you encounter is going to be able to change how you are feeling about what you've done.
And Tilly, if you could sum up everything that you learned from writing this book, what would it be? What would the message be you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I would say one of the things that I learned is that relationships are worth restoring, even through very painful means. And another thing that I've learned, I think, is that it doesn't tend to move backwards in your heart. It tends to move forwards and to get worse if it's not dealt with. So if there's something that you are thinking that is so very wrong and just incorrect, if you don't address it, I don't think that the mind is going to just suddenly start speaking truth to itself without addressing it with real truth.
The book is Seeing Green, Don't Let Envy Color Your Joy. If you would like to get more information about Tilly, you can visit the website justinandtilly.com. Tilly, in our final moments, what is the takeaway?
Takeaway is don't envy your fellow man. It is a much better way to live, to learn to feel actual joy when you see other people succeeding, especially the people who are closest to you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because that has been a very important and hard-learned lesson for me, to really worry about myself and do the best that I can and not focus on other people's accomplishments, to support them, to share their joy, to encourage them, but not make myself feel less than because I'm not achieving it.
Absolutely.
Tilly, thank you so much for joining us today. When we can stop seeing green, as you say, we can stop letting that envy color our joy, and we can live a much more happy, productive life. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
This is Conversations with Joan. Stay with us. We'll be right back.